My girlfriend spent Valentine's Day not with me, but with her friend, because he needed female help, but I found out what kind of help it really was. I never thought I'd be the guy to dump my girlfriend on Valentine's Day, but when I found out what kind of help she was really giving her friend, I had no choice. Everyone has had a girl's friend in their life who was always around, always supportive, and always suspiciously present whenever you weren't. My girlfriend had one of those friends. Her name is Anna. When we first started dating, she was the kind of girlfriend who made me feel like I was the only person in the world. She was bright, social, and always had something going on. Volunteer work, group projects, and a huge circle of friends. But when we got together, all of that seemed to quiet down. She focused on me. I noticed she stopped going out as much, canceled plans just to spend more time with me, and even distanced herself from certain people. At first, I thought it was just the honeymoon phase. I won't lie. It felt great knowing she prioritized me over everything else. The first 6 months of our relationship were perfect. We went on trips, had lazy weekends watching movies, and spent hours talking about our future. She never made me feel like I had to compete for her attention. If anything, I sometimes worried that she was cutting too many people out of her life just to be with me. But then, someone from her past came back into the picture. His name was Matt. According to Anna, he was an old friend, someone she had known since high school but hadn't really talked to in years. She casually mentioned one night that he had reached out to her, saying he was going through a rough time and needed a friend. I didn't think much of it. After all, we all have people from our past who suddenly pop back into our lives. At first, it was nothing. Just a few texts here and there. How are you? Message. A long time no see type of conversation. But then, little things started to change. Anna started checking her phone more. She'd smile at messages she didn't share with me. At first, I brushed it off. But slowly, Matt's name started coming up more and more. She started mentioning things like, Matt had such a bad day today. Or, I need to check in on Matt later. Then came the calls. She would answer in a softer voice, her conversations with him stretching longer each time. When I asked what they talked about, she always gave vague answers, oh, just life stuff, or he's just venting. That was the first time I started to feel like something was off. At first, I convinced myself that I was overthinking things. Anna had always been the kind of person who cared deeply about others, sometimes even at her own expense. It was one of the things I admired about her. But as the months passed, Matt became more than just an occasional name in conversation. He became a constant presence in her life. His messages arrived at all hours, his calls interrupted our plans, and Anna always seemed to be checking in on him. It wasn't just friendly concern, it was priority. What bothered me most was that Matt had no interest in acknowledging me. If they were such good friends, it made no sense that he avoided meeting me. Whenever I brought it up, Anna brushed off my concerns, saying Matt wasn't comfortable around new people. Her defensiveness unsettled me, but I tried to let it go. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Then, small things started adding up. Plans we had made were suddenly postponed because Matt needed support. She started leaving the apartment more frequently, always with the same reason. Matt was having a rough time, and she wanted to be there for him. One night, she stayed out far later than usual, saying they had been talking for hours. That was the moment doubt fully settled in. Anna had been devoted to our relationship, but now, it felt like I was sharing her with someone else. She refused to see any issue with it, insisting that she was simply helping a friend. I wanted to believe her. I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my chest every time Matt's name appeared on her phone. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. And then came Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day was supposed to be ours. We had talked about it weeks in advance, even made dinner reservations at one of our favorite restaurants. Anna had always been the type to make a big deal out of special occasions, so I expected her usual excitement. But a few days before, her plans suddenly changed. She told me that Matt had been struggling ever since his recent breakup, and she didn't want him to be alone. She said he needed female advice, and that she was the only person who could really help him. It didn't feel like a request. It felt like a decision she had already made. I asked why she had to be the one to comfort him, why he couldn't turn to someone else. She told me I was being selfish. That was the moment I realized I was no longer her priority. On the night of Valentine's Day, I sat alone in our apartment while she spent the evening with Matt. Hours passed, and the more I thought about it, the more I felt like I had been emotionally pushed aside. That was when I made my decision. I didn't text her that night. I didn't call. I didn't ask when she would be home. I sat at the table where we were supposed to have dinner together, staring at the untouched plates. The restaurant reservation had long been canceled, and the small, wrapped gift I had planned to give her sat on the counter, meaningless now. The hours dragged on. I tried to distract myself, flipping through channels, scrolling through my phone, but nothing could take my mind off where she was and who she was with. It wasn't just about Valentine's Day. It was the realization that I had slowly become an afterthought in my own relationship. Outside, The city had quieted down. The sidewalks, once filled with couples walking home from their dinners and dates, were now empty. The only light in the apartment came from the TV, casting a dull glow on the walls. Eventually, she came home. It was late, far later than I had expected. She moved around the apartment like it was any other night, placing her things down casually, showing no urgency, no guilt, no awareness of the weight of what she had done. She didn't even seem to register the fact that I had spent the night waiting for her. There was no attempt to acknowledge how I felt, no effort to explain why she had chosen to spend the most intimate day of the year with someone else. It was as if my emotions were irrelevant, as if I should have understood without question why she had made the choice she did. That was the moment I realized something had shifted inside me. The anger I had felt earlier had faded. Even the hurt was dull now. What was left was something colder, a sense of clarity that told me I was wasting my time. I didn't argue. I didn't ask her for anything. I just sat there, letting the weight of everything settle in. This wasn't a one-time event. This wasn't an exception. This was a pattern, and it wasn't going to change. By the time the sun started rising, I had already made my decision. I spent the entire evening alone, replaying everything in my mind. Anna had chosen to spend Valentine's Day with Matt. Not just for a quick check-in, not just for a brief conversation. She had spent the whole night with him while I sat in the apartment, waiting for a girlfriend who no longer prioritized me. I no longer felt confusion or frustration. I felt something final. The moment she made the decision to go to Matt, she had already chosen the outcome of our relationship. When she finally came home, it was past midnight. She walked in like nothing was wrong, casually setting down her things and stretching as if it had been a long, tiring day. There was no hesitation, no guilt, no attempt to explain herself. She looked at me, expecting things to continue as usual. I told her it was over. I didn't ask questions. I didn't let her justify her choices. I told her that she had made it clear where her priorities were, and I had no interest in staying with someone who saw me as second place. At first, she laughed, as if she thought I was joking. When she realized I was serious, her expression changed. She tried to downplay what had happened, saying that Matt needed help, that I was making too big of a deal out of this. I told her I didn't care. I wasn't going to argue. If Matt was so important to her, she could go be with him. She started getting defensive, saying I was being irrational, that I was throwing away our relationship over one night. But it wasn't just one night. It was months of seeing her drift away while she made excuses. It was every unanswered concern, every dismissed feeling, every moment where I could feel myself becoming less and less important to her. She accused me of not understanding, of being insecure, of making assumptions about something innocent. But I had seen enough. I wasn't interested in debating whether she had technically cheated or not. I wasn't going to beg for her attention or fight for a place in her life when she had already given it to someone else. I grabbed my things without hesitation. She stood there, arms crossed, still convinced I was overreacting. Even now, even as I packed, she thought I would calm down, that I would stay, that I wouldn't actually go through with it. I walked to the door, turned back once to see if she had anything left to say. If she would finally, at the last possible moment, show that she cared. She didn't. So I left. Was over. I walked out of the apartment and did not look back. The street was quiet, and the air was cold, but I felt nothing except certainty. The relationship was over. I had no reason to stay. I reached my car and sat inside, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. For months, I had ignored the signs. I had convinced myself that Anna still cared, that Matt was just a friend, that I was imagining things. But her actions had shown the truth. I had been in a one-sided relationship, holding on to something that no longer existed. My phone buzzed. It was Anna. She wanted to know if I was serious about leaving. A few minutes later, another message came through, asking me to come back so we could talk. Then a call. Then another message. Each one carried the same tone. She was not apologizing, not taking responsibility, just reacting to the fact that I had walked away. I turned off my phone. There was no need for any more conversations. She had made her choices, and now I had made mine. I started the car and drove with no destination in mind. The longer I was on the road, the lighter I felt. I no longer had to justify my feelings, no longer had to wonder if I was being paranoid, no longer had to compete for attention with someone who had been given more space in my relationship than I had. After driving for a while, I pulled into a gas station and sat for a moment, thinking about my next step. I needed a place to stay. I had no intention of going back to the apartment, not even for a temporary solution. I called a close friend and told him what had happened. He was not surprised. He had seen the signs before I did. He told me I had made the right choice, that I had wasted enough time on someone who did not respect me. He told me to come over. I drove straight there. That night, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Relief. I had been fighting to hold on to something that was already gone. Now, I did not have to fight anymore. The next morning, I woke up feeling clear-headed. There was no urge to check my phone, No lingering doubt about whether I had done the right thing. I knew I had. The relationship had been over long before I walked out that door. I had just been unwilling to accept it. Anna had not contacted me again. I did not expect her to. She had dismissed my feelings for months, and there was no reason to believe she would suddenly care now. Whatever she had with Matt, whether it was an emotional attachment or something more, I was no longer concerned. She had made her choice, and I had removed myself from it. Later that day, I got a message from her parents. They wanted to know what had happened, why I had left, and if Anna was okay. Instead of dealing with it myself, I told them to ask her. I had no interest in explaining something she should have told them herself. That a few hours later, Anna sent me one last message. She asked me to tell her parents that everything was fine, that I had left on my own, and that there was no need for them to worry about her. She did not ask how I was doing. She did not express regret. She only cared about avoiding an uncomfortable conversation with her family. I did not respond. Over the next few weeks, I adjusted to my new reality. I found a place to stay, reconnected with people I had been distant from, and focused on moving forward. Looking back, I saw how much I had let myself shrink to fit into a relationship where I was not valued. I had ignored the signs, convinced myself that Anna still cared, and wasted time trying to hold on to something that had already ended. Now, I was done wasting time. The chapter with Anna was closed, and I had no desire to reopen it.